and surrounding them, arranged in a messy circle like a protective barrier, is the weirdest collection of stuff you've ever seen. It's a treasure hoard, but not of gold or jewels. It's personal items, things they must have grabbed as they ran through the station. There are data pads, their screens dark, a few framed holographic photos showing landscapes from different worlds, a couple of standard-issue uniforms chewed on at the sleeves, and right in the middle of the pile, sitting like a crown jewel, is a ceramic mug. It's chipped on the handle and printed on the side in cheerful blocky galactic standard font are the words, "Galaxy's Best Mom." They aren't guarding loot. They're guarding memories. They're protecting these random objects like they're the most important things in the universe. They nudge them back into place if one rolls away. It's not a display of greed. It's a display of desperation. Jake just stops and watches for a minute. He doesn't move toward them. He lets them see him. He makes his body look small, non-threatening. He keeps his hands visible. Then he starts talking, his voice low and calm, the way you'd talk to a nervous dog. "Hey there," he says. "Yeah, I see you. Big guys, aren't you? I see you there." He's not using any special words. He's just using a calm tone. He takes one slow, careful step forward, then another. He gets about 10 feet away and slowly sinks into a crouch, making himself even smaller. He extends his hand, not to touch them, but to let them sniff. He keeps his fingers relaxed. He keeps talking that quiet, nonsensical monologue. "Just gonna say hello. That's all. Not here to cause any trouble." The biggest one, the one closest to him, lifts its head. Its nostrils flare, taking in his scent. The low, worried rumble in its chest stutters. Stops. Its ears, which were pinned back, twitch forward. Its huge head, with eyes the size of dinner plates, cocks to the side. The tension in the room, which was so thick you could taste it, just evaporates. And then its tail starts to wag. It's not a little wag. It's a huge, heavy, thumping wag that whumps against the floor plating. A deep, thunderous purr starts up, rumbling through the deck and right up into your bones. It's a sound of pure, uncomplicated relief. The other two uncurl, their postures softening. They make little chuffing noises, nuzzling each other and then looking back at Jake. The fear is gone. Replaced by cautious, overwhelming curiosity, Jake lets out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He looks at them, these three giant creatures now acting like puppies who just found a new friend. He looks at the Galaxy's Best Mom mug, and it all clicks. Every report of chaos and destruction takes on a new meaning. The torn doors weren't an assault. They were an escape. The scattered equipment wasn't vandalism. It was panic. They weren't being aggressive. They were having the alien equivalent of a full-blown panic attack. They were lost, separated from their family, and surrounded by giants who kept screaming and shining lights at them. This isn't the behavior of vicious killers. It's the behavior of scared kids looking for their pack. They aren't monsters. They're teenagers. Big, powerful, confused teenagers who just want to go home. The relief in the room is palpable, but it brings a colder, sharper question right along with it. A question that makes Jake's stomach sink. Why were they so desperate? Why were they guarding these sad little souvenirs like they were the only things left in the world that mattered? What happened to their family? So Jake walks out of that recreation center, the sound of those rumbling purrs still vibrating in the air, and he doesn't go to the council to deliver a reassuring report. He goes straight to the research team's makeshift lab. He finds Dr. Frost, who's been hovering nervously, looking like she expects to be blamed for the whole mess. He doesn't yell. He just stands there, calm, and asks the one question no one else bothered with. The question that changes everything. Where are their parents? The room goes quiet. The other researchers stop what they're doing. They look at Dr. Frost. She looks at her data pad, then at the floor, then back at Jake. You can see the conflict on her face. The truth is in her files. She knows it. She just never had the authority, or maybe the courage, to push it to the front. Now, with this calm human blocking the doorway and asking the obvious question, she has to say it. The story comes out in pieces, reluctantly, like pulling teeth. The initial survey team found them on a planet designated Kepler 442b, a family unit. 2 adults, 3 cubs. The initial reports were ecstatic. A new sentient species, intelligent tool use, complex social bonding. But then, the first contact team moved in. Standard procedure. Get scans. Take tissue samples. Assess the threat level. The adults, of course, were protective. When the team got too close to the cubs with their humming, buzzing equipment, the bigger one, the one the researchers had nicknamed Big Tiny, positioned himself between his kids and the strangers. He vocalized a low warning rumble. He didn't attack. He just made it very, very clear that the strangers were not welcome near his young. It was a basic parental instinct. Universal, really. The lead xenopsychologist on site didn't see it that way. He saw a dominant display from a large unknown predator. He filed a report labeling the adults inherently aggressive and unmanageably hostile. He recommended immediate separation for the safety of the research subjects and staff. The cubs, being smaller and seemingly more docile, were deemed viable for study. The adults were deemed a containment risk, and the galactic bureaucracy, a machine that excels at processing paperwork and avoiding liability, did what it does best. It processed the paperwork. It followed the recommendation. It didn't question the assessment. It didn't consider context. It saw a checkbox for dangerous and it ticked it. The parents weren't taken to a research outpost for further observation. They were loaded onto a high-security transport under heavy sedation and shipped off to prison planet Sigma-9. It's not a nice place. It's where they send pirates, terrorists, and the occasional rogue AI. It's maximum security. No visitors. No communication. They were processed into the system like common criminals. Jake listens to all this, his face a mask of calm that doesn't quite hide the disbelief. He doesn't need to raise his voice. His quiet forensic skepticism is more powerful than any shout. He picks apart their logic point by point. "Let me get this straight," he says, his voice flat. "You found a family. You scared the kids. The parents did what any parent in the universe would do. They got between you and their children, and your response was to label them psychotic killers and dump them in alien Alcatraz." He lays it out with the blunt, devastating clarity of an outsider who isn't invested in their institutional ego. He connects the dots they all refuse to see. The Cubs' rampage wasn't random violence. It was a distress signal. Every torn door was them trying to find a way out. Every scattered piece of equipment was a byproduct of their panic. They weren't trying to conquer the station. They were crying. They were 3 kids, alone and terrified, surrounded by giants screaming for their mom and dad in the only way they knew how. Their chaos was grief. This revelation hits the council members who are now listening on the comms like a physical blow. They'd been so focused on the symptoms, the property damage, the evacuations, they never once considered the cause. They never considered that these creatures might have emotions, that they might feel love and fear and loss. Their entire response was built on a fundamental failure of imagination, a cold, clinical inability to see family dynamics where they only saw a threat matrix. The root cause of this galactic emergency wasn't the nature of the Cubs. It was the galaxy's own nature, its fear, its rush to categorize and contain, its utter lack of empathy. Jake looks around the room at the stunned scientists and the silent council feed. The solution is obvious to him. It's not a bigger cage. It's not more sedation. It's not a stricter protocol. All of that was just more of the same thinking that created this nightmare. The solution is to fix the original, stupid, heartbreaking mistake. The solution is a reunion. You know, when the galaxy faces a crisis, the playbook is usually pretty simple. Escalate, contain, overwhelm the problem with more force than it can handle. Bigger guns, stronger cages, more intimidating postures. It's a philosophy built on fear, and it usually works. But this situation was already proof that the old playbook was failing. Hard. So Jake, standing in the middle of the command center with the images of 3 distressed cubs still fresh in everyone's mind, proposes the one thing nobody in the room saw coming. He doesn't ask for a fleet. He doesn't ask for a new superweapon. He looks the most powerful officials in the galaxy in the eye and tells them they need to break 2 inmates out of the most secure prison in the sector. The room, which had just started to calm down, immediately erupts again. But this time it's not panic. It's pure bureaucratic horror. Dr. Frost is the first to voice the collective dread, the legal implications, the diplomatic incidents, the sheer career-ending professional risk of it all. Sigma-9 isn't some local lockup. It's a symbol of galactic law and order. You don't just waltz in and spring a couple of inmates because you feel sorry for them. The official process for review, for appeals, for reassessment, that would take a minimum of 6 to 8 months. Probably longer. There are forms, committees, hearings. The Galactic Council just declared their first Code Crimson emergency in a generation, not for a supernova or alien invasion, but because 3 vicious cubs escaped their cage. They've evacuated 12 space stations and caused 6 billion credits in damage. But what if everyone read this situation completely wrong? What if the galaxy's most feared creatures weren't monsters at all, just scared kids looking for their parents? You know, when the Galactic Council declares a code crimson, you expect something truly catastrophic. A supernova threatening inhabited systems, maybe, or an armada of hostile warships breaching the border. Not 3 juvenile creatures, each about the size of a small ground vehicle, who'd just figured out how to jimmy a faulty lock on their observation habitat. But here we are. The council chamber, usually a place of dignified debate and multi-species procedure, is buzzing like a disrupted hive. Holograms flash damage reports, casualty estimates, evacuation status, all the grim paperwork of panic. Commander Vextol, a rigid military type whose feathers seem permanently ruffled by the unexpected, is running through the numbers. He treats each statistic like another tick on a doomsday clock. 12 space stations fully evacuated, not because of structural failure or enemy action, but because these 3 escapees showed up, scared and confused, and everyone else ran. 4 battle fleets, the kind usually deployed to pacify rebellious colonies, were pulled back from patrol routes. Not because they were losing, but because their standard intimidation tactics, loud noises, bright lights, aggressive posturing, just made the cubs more agitated. 6 billion credits in damage, mostly from doors being torn off, walls scratched up, and a lot of very expensive scientific equipment being, well, used as chew toys. And the whole time, Dr. Frost, the lead xenobiologist, is sitting there looking like she's watching a bad dream. Her initial reports, submitted weeks ago, said the cubs were docile. Curious even. They'd nuzzle scanning equipment. They'd play with enrichment toys. They'd vocalize in what her notes described as contented rumbles. She's trying to point this out to suggest a massive misunderstanding is underway. But no one's listening to the science. They're listening to the fear. Ambassador Quildar, a diplomat whose career is built on worst-case scenarios, seizes the moment. He inflates the threat with poetic, terrifying language. He doesn't call them cubs. He calls them apex predators of apex predators. He paints a picture of innate, unstoppable violence, a genetic imperative to dominate and destroy. He's good at his job. You can feel the room shift. The bureaucratic impulse, a powerful force across the galaxy, takes over. The protocol is clear. Contain first, ask questions later. The question of whether these are misunderstood creatures gets buried under a mountain of emergency directives and containment procedures. They're about to authorize a full planetary quarantine and a shoot-on-sight order for any vessel that gets near the Cubs' last known location. It's the standard playbook. It's what they always do. But this time there's a hitch. The standard playbook is clearly not working. It's making things worse. Commander Vextol's own report shows that every aggressive action has been met with a bigger, messier reaction from the Cubs. They're not fighting a war. They're having a tantrum on a galactic scale. A quiet realization dawns in the chamber, cutting through the panic. They don't need a bigger gun or a stronger cage. They need a translator. Not for language, but for behavior. They need someone who can bridge the massive gap in understanding between a terrified galactic bureaucracy and 3 terrified, whatever they are. So they make a call. A surprising call. A call nobody in that room raised on tales of human volatility and violence ever thought they'd make. They request a human expert. So the council gets their human expert. Picture this. A diplomatic shuttle, official markings and everything, comes in for a landing on the pristine council docking bay. It doesn't glide. It sort of lurches. One of the portside thrusters is sputtering, coughing out little puffs of black smoke, and the whole ship settles onto the deck with a grinding noise that makes the head of docking operations wince. This is not the impressive entrance they were expecting. The ramp descends, and out walks Captain Jake Morrison. He's not in armor. He's not even in a crisp uniform. He's wearing sturdy boots, cargo pants with worn knees, and a jacket that's seen better days. He's not a soldier or a scientist. His file says former zookeeper, and he looks it. He's got the patient, observant eyes of someone used to waiting for an animal to make the first move. He walks right up to the reception committee, a bunch of officials stiff with protocol and anxiety. He doesn't salute. He just gives an apologetic shrug. "Sorry about the landing," he says, his voice calm and level. "Old girl's got a port thruster issue. Been meaning to get it looked at. The council members exchange glances. This is their specialist? This guy who talks about his ship like it's a beat-up old truck? The head of security starts to explain the full containment protocol, gesturing to a team in heavy, sealed environment suits carrying what look like high-powered stun rifles. Jake looks at them, then back at the security chief. He doesn't look alarmed. He looks amused. "You're not going in there with those things, are you?" he asks, like he's asking if they're seriously bringing umbrellas to the beach. "You look like weird robots. You move like weird robots. To a scared animal, you're not a person. You're a loud, clanky threat. You'll just scare them worse." He completely rejects the weapons-first approach they've been failing with for days. He lays out a different philosophy, one that sounds impossibly slow and naive to them. He talks about trust building, about reading body language, about letting the animal set the pace. His whole method hinges on one simple, almost offensively simple idea. You just have to keep it calm, he says. The number one rule is to never ever let them think you're more scared than they are. Fear is contagious. Calm is contagious too. You can see the council's panic start to crack. This isn't more of the same scary talk they've been feeding each other. This is something new. This is a guy who isn't reacting to the story they've built up in their heads. He's looking at the actual problem in front of them. He reframes everything. This isn't a containment issue, he says. It's a communication breakdown. A giant galactic-sized misunderstanding between species that don't speak the same physical language. He's not here to fight monsters. He's here to meet some animals that are having a really, really bad day. The officials, so used to responding to threats with bigger threats, are forced to consider a wild idea. Maybe the problem isn't the cubs. Maybe the problem is their own fear. Maybe they've been the ones escalating this whole situation. It's an uncomfortable thought, and it hangs in the air as Jake turns away from them. He takes off his jacket, drops it on a nearby console. He asks for the location of the recreation center they've cornered the cubs in. He doesn't want a weapon. He doesn't want a suit. He just starts walking. His hands loose at his sides, his posture relaxed. He's going to go meet the so-called monsters that have the entire galactic government in a panic, and he's going to do it like he's walking into an enclosure back home, hoping the new resident is in a good mood. So Jake walks into the recreation center. The big doors hiss shut behind him. The room is huge, meant for off-duty crews to relax, with high ceilings and observation windows looking out at the stars. But right now it doesn't look like a lounge. It looks like a den. The lights are low. Half the furniture is pushed against the walls. And in the center of the room, 3 enormous shapes are huddled together. They're big, each one the size of a small car, like a young bear mixed with something more. Thick gray fur, powerful limbs, intelligent eyes that are currently wide with fear. They aren't baring teeth or posturing for a fight. They're pressed close, a tangle of limbs making low, distressed rumbling sounds. Their body language is a masterclass in insecurity. Ears are flat, shoulders are hunched. They keep glancing at the door, flinching at every tiny noise from the ship's systems. This isn't the stance of predators sizing up a meal. It's the posture of kids who think a monster is in the closet. Jake listens to all of this. He lets them talk themselves out. He lets them outline the entire slow grinding machinery of galactic justice. And then he just points. He points at the live feed from the recreation center, where the 3 cubs are huddled together, letting out soft, mournful sounds. "I understand the process," he says, his voice quiet but cutting through all the noise. "I really do. But you have to understand what that process costs. Those kids in there have been crying for their parents for 2 days straight. You want to make them wait another 6 months? 8? What do you think another 8 months of this does to them?" He's not arguing law. He's arguing morality. He's making them see the human, or, well, the alien, cost of their beloved procedures. He reframes the entire operation. He's not proposing a jailbreak. He's proposing an emergency medical evacuation. He points out that their own laws have provisions for extraordinary measures in extreme humanitarian circumstances. He suggests using a vessel with full diplomatic immunity, making the whole thing a protected diplomatic action, not a criminal one. He's not a commando planning a heist. He's a specialist responding to a critical situation. The patients are in acute psychological distress, and their only viable treatment is immediate family reunification. The prison is just the unfortunate location where the patients are currently being held. He leverages their own rules against them, twisting bureaucracy into a tool for compassion instead of containment. The council members look at each other. You can see the internal struggle. Their entire careers, their whole understanding of how the universe works, is built on following the rules. The rules are safe. The rules are predictable. What Jake is asking them to do is the opposite of safe. It's messy. It's unpredictable. It could blow up in their faces in a spectacular fashion, but they also just had their noses rubbed in the catastrophic failure of their standard approach. They look at the feed of the cubs. They remember the reports of the parents simply being protective. For the first time, the fear of breaking the rules is starting to be outweighed by the shame of having done the wrong thing. It's a reluctant agreement. There's no cheer, no sense of triumph. It's a grim, nervous consensus. They're not doing this because they're brave. They're doing it because they've run out of other options that don't make them feel like monsters. They sign the emergency authorization, giving Jake's rickety diplomatic ship clearance for a medical intervention at Sigma 9. The paperwork is a masterpiece of creative phrasing, a legal shield built on technicalities and good intentions. Meanwhile, light years away, the director of Prison Planet Sigma 9 is having a completely normal day. His world is one of routine and control. The inmates are secure, the guards are vigilant. The endless, silent rotation of the prison facility continues. A perfect machine of isolation. He gets a routine notice about an incoming diplomatic vessel for a pre-scheduled consultation. He thinks nothing of it. It's probably some bureaucratic nonsense. Some counselor wanting to check a box for a report. He has his staff run the standard background checks on the ship's credentials. They come back clean. He approves the landing. He has no idea that the consultation is a fiction. He has no idea that the man walking down the ramp isn't a paper pusher. He's there to dismantle a small piece of his perfectly ordered world, not with weapons, but with a loophole and a profoundly simple idea that a family belongs together. So the rescue mission at Sigma 9 plays out without a single shot fired. No alarms, no explosions, no dramatic stealth sequences in ventilation shafts. The entire operation hinges on a flimsy stack of data slates and the temporary authorization codes blinking on Jake's diplomatic badge. His ship, the one with the sputtering thruster, sits on the prison landing pad looking deeply out of place among the angular, armored enforcement vessels. Jake walks into the main administrative block like he owns the place, which technically his diplomatic immunity suggests he kind of does. The prison director, a stern individual whose uniform is so crisp it looks like it could cut glass, meets him with deeply ingrained skepticism. This is a man who deals in absolutes. Inmates are in, everyone else is out. The idea that someone would just show up with paperwork to remove 2 of his charges doesn't compute. It's a system error. He examines the council's emergency order, his eyes scanning line after line of legalese that essentially gives this random human carte blanche. You can see the conflict on his face. His every instinct is to refuse, to call Central Command for verification, to delay. But the authorization codes check out. The digital signatures are valid. He is quite literally outranked by a paragraph in a memo. He has to comply. The tension is purely bureaucratic, a silent war between procedure and an unprecedented directive. They walk down to the maximum security wing. The air is cold and smells of recycled oxygen and antiseptic. The cells are fronted by solid energy fields humming with a low, threatening frequency. The director inputs a code and one of the fields flickers out. The heavy door behind it grinds open, and out step the parents. They don't burst out in a rage. They emerge slowly, cautiously. They are massive, even larger than Jake anticipated. Their fur a darker gray than the cubs, marked with the scars and wear of a life lived in the wild. They don't look like mindless killers. They look tired and worried. Their intelligent eyes sweep the corridor, taking in the armed guards, the director, and finally Jake. They don't snarl. They don't charge. They just watch him, their postures reserved but curious. There's a dignity to them, a quiet gravity that the label inmate completely fails to capture. Jake does exactly what he did with the cubs. He makes himself small. He keeps his hands visible. He speaks in that same low, calm tone. He doesn't try to explain the situation with words they can't understand. He explains it with his body language. I am not a threat. I am here to help. The bigger one, the male, Big Tiny, takes a step forward. He lowers his huge head, bringing his nose level with Jake. He sniffs the air. And then something shifts in his expression. The cautious tension in his shoulders relaxes just a fraction. It's not aggression. It's the dawning of a very fragile, very cautious hope. It's as if he can sense on some deep instinctual level that this small, odd-looking creature is not part of the system that captured them. That he represents something different. The trip back to the council station is silent. The parents sit in the cargo hold of Jake's ship, calm and watchful. They don't try to break anything. They just wait. When the ship docks and the ramp lowers back into the recreation area, the cubs are already waiting. They've sensed it. They know. The moment the adults step into view, the three cubs don't just run. They launch themselves across the room in a tumbling, ecstatic wave of fur and joy. The sound that fills the bay is overwhelming. It's not roaring. It's a complex, rumbling chorus of purrs, interspersed with high-pitched crying sounds and a deeper melodic singing from the adults. It's the sound of a family whole again. The cubs pile into their parents, nuzzling and rubbing against them. And in their enthusiastic relief, they practically bowl Jake over in the process. Three enormous bodies pressing against him in a moment of pure, unguarded gratitude. He just laughs, patting a furry flank, caught in the middle of the reunion. The prison director, who had followed in a separate shuttle to observe the transfer, stands at the edge of the room. He watches this scene, this messy, loud, affectionate pile of creatures his organization had classified as the galaxy's most dire threat, and he manages a grim, dry joke. He mutters to one of his guards that this must be the easiest jailbreak in history. But the joke falls flat even to him. There's no punchline. The scene in front of him is the punchline. It undercuts every report, every risk assessment, every fearful decision that led to this moment. The adults, the so-called vicious apex predators, are now gently nuzzling their cubs and rumbling contentedly at the human who just returned them. They show a level of gentleness and obvious gratitude that makes the very concept of their imprisonment look absurd. The resolution is clear, and it's written in the language of family, not force. Love, not violence, was the actual key that unlocked the galaxy's most dangerous crisis. It wasn't found in an armory or a tactical manual. It was found in a recreation bay, in the simple, universal need for a child to be with its parents. The immediate problem is solved. The family is together. The purring is so loud it's vibrating the deck plates. But the larger problem is just beginning, because the council is still watching, and they now have to figure out what to do with this new reality, where their entire understanding of threat and security has just been publicly dismantled by a former zookeeper and a family of inmates who just wanted a hug. Now the Galactic Council has a choice to make. They can try to bury the whole embarrassing incident, file it away, and hope everyone forgets that they declared a Code Crimson panic over a family reunion. Or they can do the one thing bureaucracy hates more than anything: admit they were completely, utterly, systemically wrong. To their credit, and probably to their own immense surprise, they choose the second option. It's not a quiet admission either. It's a formal public apology, broadcast across the council networks. Commander Vextall, the same guy who presented the Cubs as a doomsday clock, is the one who has to deliver it. He stands at the podium, his feathers looking a little less ruffled and a lot more humble, and he addresses the family directly. He acknowledges the misjudgment. He admits the flawed approach. He doesn't sugarcoat it. They saw a family and they saw a threat. They were wrong. This isn't just about saving face. It can't be. The images of the reunited family purring contentedly in their new quarters have already circled the galaxy. The story is out. So the apology is the first step in a much bigger, much harder process, fundamentally changing how the entire galactic government handles things it doesn't understand. For centuries, the first response to the unknown has been containment. Assess the threat level. Build a stronger cage. This entire crisis proved that approach is not just ineffective. It's often the very thing that creates the crisis. They have to build a new system from the ground up, and they know exactly who they need to build it. They offer Jake a permanent position. It's not a military title. It's not a scientific post. It's something entirely new: Galactic Animal Relations Specialist. It comes with a full diplomatic passport, immunity from local laws, which Jake finds hilarious, given his recent jailbreak activities, and a mandate to intervene whenever a species is being misunderstood into a problem. To make the point crystal clear, they give him an unlimited research budget and his own dedicated ship. Not a hand-me-down clunker with a busted thruster, but a brand new vessel, outfitted for long-term observation and peaceful contact. It's a massive policy shift, all because one guy looked at a monster and saw a scared kid. Jake's whole demeanor, his way of cutting through panic with simple, practical logic, becomes a kind of unofficial motto for this new department. His habit of saying, "be that as it may," whenever someone starts quoting regulations at him, a phrase that politely acknowledges a fact before completely dismissing its relevance, starts getting quoted in memos. It becomes a symbol of a new kind of expertise, not the kind that comes from weapons or titles, but the kind that comes from patience and observation. It's humble expertise overcoming institutional fear. Meanwhile, the family itself gets a new beginning. They're not sent back to their homeworld, which is now flagged for long-term protective status. They're not put in a zoo or a research facility. They're given a permanent home aboard a specially configured diplomatic vessel, a mobile habitat where they can live together, safe and undisturbed. The ship's logs from its first month are boring in the best way possible. Reports of the cubs playing, the parents sunning themselves under the simulated light of a star, the whole family gathering around to watch the swirl of a nebula pass by the main viewing port. It's a life of quiet, affectionate normalcy, the very thing the Council's fear almost permanently destroyed. This whole resolution does something unexpected for humanity's reputation. Usually, when humans show up in galactic tales, they're the warriors, the stubborn, violent, unpredictable newcomers who solve problems with overwhelming force. But this story casts them in a totally different light. Jake wasn't a hero because he fought better than anyone else. He was a hero because he understood something everyone else missed. Humans in this new narrative become the empathy-driven ambassadors, the ones who are just crazy enough, just patient enough, to try and bridge the gap of fear between species. They're the ones willing to offer a hand to sniff instead of firing a blaster. The lesson for the galaxy is a tough one to swallow, but it's unavoidable. Understanding social and emotional needs isn't a soft, fluffy alternative to real security. It is real security. It's a more effective, more durable tool than fear-driven containment could ever be. You can build a cage to hold a creature, but you can't build a cage to hold its grief or its fear or its love for its family. Those things will always find a way out, and they'll usually take a few space stations with them on the way. The real containment field is trust, and you can't regulate that into existence. You have to build it. So the immediate crisis is over. The family is safe. Jake has a new job. The Council has a new policy. It seems like a tidy ending, but it's really just the start of a much bigger question. This worked for one family of large, purring, bioluminescent, whatever they are. What happens next time? The galaxy is a very big, very strange place, filled with things that screech in the void and things that swim in the atmospheres of gas giants and things that communicate through complex mathematics. The old system had one answer for all of them: caution, distance, and a big red button labeled quarantine. That system is now broken. What do they do now? You know how one event can sometimes just crack the foundation of how everyone thinks? The reunion of that family on the Council station did exactly that for the whole concept of interspecies diplomacy. It was like a pebble dropped in a pond, and the ripples just kept going, reaching further and further out, changing everything they touched. The policy shift wasn't just a one-off, a special exception made for a cute story. It became the new template. The Council's new approach, born from sheer necessity and a hefty dose of public embarrassment, started seeping into how they handled every new problem species. A report would come in, a sighting of something big and unknown, a ship damaged, an outpost reporting strange noises. The old response was automatic. Cordon off the area. Dispatch a containment team. Assume hostility. The new response was slower, more deliberate. They'd check the new protocols. They'd ask a simple question first. Could this be a misunderstanding? You see it in cases that would have been open and shut before. Take the so-called vicious space whales in the Cygnus X1 sector. Enormous gas giant dwelling creatures that had been knocking navigation buoys out of alignment for decades. The official file labeled them persistent hazards to navigation. The standard solution was a program of acoustic harassment, broadcasting loud, unpleasant noises to drive them away from shipping lanes. It never worked for long, and it probably gave the whales a massive headache. After the Alpha Cub incident, that whole file got pulled for review. A new team went out, not with noisemakers, but with passive sensors. They just watched. They recorded. They discovered the buoys were interfering with the whale's own long-range communication. a complex song structure they used to keep their pods connected across thousands of miles. The whales weren't being vicious. They were trying to clear a noisy, annoying obstacle out of their telephone line. The solution wasn't louder noises. It was moving the buoys a few hundred miles. A problem that had festered for decades was solved in a month, not with force, but with a little bit of patience and a lot of listening. Jake's zookeeper ethos became the unofficial manual for this new way of thinking. It wasn't a complicated doctrine. It was a set of practical, almost simple-minded principles. Careful observation first. Don't assume you know what you're looking at. Gentle proximity. Move slowly. Let the other party set the pace. Consistent communication. Even if they don't understand the words, they understand tone and intent. It was a template built on respect, not fear. It was about asking, what are they trying to do, instead of how do we stop them? This approach started getting uploaded to the Galactic database, a new field guide for first contact that looked less like a military manual and more like, well, a zookeeper's notebook. And this shift, it's important to understand, stopped being just about animals. It started redefining what the entire galaxy considered a threat. A creature wasn't automatically a threat just because it was big, or had sharp teeth, or made a scary noise. A threat was something that intended harm. Everything else was just a creature being itself in a universe it didn't entirely understand. This new lens changed the narrative at a fundamental level. The story the galaxy told itself about the unknown changed. It shifted from a story of containment, us versus them, inside the cage versus outside, to a story of potential companionship. From intimidation to understanding, it became less about proving who was strongest and more about figuring out how to share the same space. The other species in the galaxy, the ones who'd always viewed humans as these wildly unpredictable and often violent newcomers, started to see them in a new light. The Council's very public embrace of Jake's methods was a huge signal. The narrative flipped. Humans weren't just the ones who'd start a bar fight with a 7-foot-tall reptilian alien. They were the ones, and this became a common saying, who were crazy enough to pet anything that looked like it might enjoy a good belly rub. It was a joke, but it contained a real truth. It was a recognition of a specific bizarre kind of courage, not the courage to face down danger with a weapon, but the courage to offer trust first, to be the one to make the vulnerable move, to risk looking foolish in the hope of making a friend. This unlikely heroism of ordinary caretaking, of patience and empathy, directly challenged centuries of galactic protocol that valued force and predictable responses above all else. Empathy and creativity, long considered soft skills irrelevant to the hard realities of diplomacy and security, were suddenly valuable tools. They were no longer alternatives to force. They were the first best option. Using them wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of a more sophisticated, more effective approach. A team that could figure out why a space whale was grumpy was infinitely more valuable than a fleet that could just blow it up. The resolution of the Alpha Cub crisis proved that. It provided a blueprint. It showed that the most durable solutions weren't the loudest or the strongest, but the smartest and the kindest. Meanwhile, Jake, in his new ship with his new title and his effectively unlimited budget, isn't resting on his laurels. He's looking at the star charts. The incident report feed on his console scrolls with new entries every day. A tunneling creature disrupting a planetary power grid. A crystalline life form that's absorbing communication satellites. A swarm of bioluminescent insects causing sensor ghosts across a dozen systems. The old galaxy would have seen each of these as a threat to be neutralized. Jake just sees a list of puzzles. He wonders as he plots a course to the next curious case. What other monsters are out there just waiting for someone to see past the label? He wonders what they're really trying to say, and if the solution might be as simple as a calm voice and the right kind of snack. The emergency is over, but the work, the real work of understanding a strange and wonderful universe is only just beginning. So the next time you hear about a vicious creature, remember this story. The labels we slap on things out of fear are usually wrong. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is offer a belly rub and a calm voice instead of brandishing a blaster in a containment field. Keep looking beyond the first scary impression. Keep questioning the official story, because you just never know what good babies just missing their families might be hiding behind those monster labels the galaxy is so quick to hand out.